The honourable member for Aston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question without notice is directed to the Prime Minister. I refer the Prime Minister to the 1987 Governor-General's address, which contained the commitment that, quote, by 1990 no child will live in poverty, unquote. As it's widely conceded by groups such as ACOS that in 1990 there are still 500,000 children living in poverty, can the Prime Minister explain why no mention of child poverty was contained in Tuesday's address by the Governor-General?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, this particular novelty, as the Treasurer has indicated behind me, has had a very long run now over the last 12 months and during the last election. And if you have any interest in it and you're mentioning organisations, may I refer you to these. I refer you to the statement of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence and of its then director, Bishop Hollingworth, that the promise that had been made by the government through the Prime Minister that by 1990 there'd be no financial need for any child to live in poverty had, well, you
Order.
see, he also said, may I say, Mr Speaker, that the same gentleman, Mr Speaker, may I say, Bishop Hollingworth, also castigated the opposition. At no point was there a castigation of the government. The only castigation of any political party by Bishop Hollingworth was the opposition, who said that they should stop their insane attempt to misrepresent this position and recognise the enormous achievement of the government in this area. Because what we had done, Mr Speaker, and I say this for the education of the honourable member, what we had done was not to sit here in the cabinet room or in the committee rooms of this government and think up ourselves what should be the levels of financial payment to deal with this issue. But we had specifically sat down with the organisations who are at the front of dealing, at the face of dealing with this issue. And in consultation with them, we fixed targets. And those targets were percentages of the married pension rate which would be paid to low-income families to ensure that the objective would be met that there would be no financial need for any child to live in poverty. And it was with organisations like ACOS, like the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, that we set those targets, which became 15% and 20% respectively. And Bishop Hollingworth, the Brotherhood of... he was then Bishop Hollingworth, don't be so damn stupid, and he was...
Order.
And Mr Speaker, I withdraw it, I withdraw it, Mr Speaker. But if
members on my left will cease interjecting.
If the honourable gentleman thinks he's added to the sum of human knowledge by me saying when I'm talking about the situation that he was Bishop Hollingworth when he was talking, and he interjects with this great profound wisdom, Archbishop Hollingworth. I mean, how stupid can you get, Mr Speaker? I mean, it really... whatever Bishop, whatever he is now. I mean, I was talking about him in his role as executive director of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, and this man now says he's something else. Well, really?
Order.
I mean, a fundamental debating point. Now, Mr Speaker, I'm saying that the Brotherhood of St Lawrence...
The member for Mayo will cease interjecting.
That's right.
The House will come to order.
I'm in a
order.
gym. Mr Speaker, so the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, the Australian Council of Social Service, the Australian Institute of Family Studies, I recommend them to this new member that he read what they had to say. All of them said that the specific promise made by the government had been delivered. Now, Mr Speaker, just on the off chance, and I presume it is an off chance, that the member has some real interest in this subject and is not concerned with trying to tear at a bone which has been well and truly buried by these organisations themselves, let me tell him as to what the position is as to what's been done, so that he'll know. 2 years ago, Mr Speaker, in deliverance of the promise that we made in 1987, we introduced the Family Allowance Supplement. And that family allowance supplement, Mr Speaker, provided tax-free allowances to low-income families. And as a result of doing that, Mr Speaker, the situation is that more than 500,000 families, including some 1.2 million children, are being helped with family allowance supplement payments or their equivalent in extra pension and benefits. Now, Mr Speaker, including family allowances, I'll inform the honourable member, in case he doesn't know, that involves over $2 billion of Commonwealth funding for children in low-income families. And as I say, it's that process, Mr Speaker, which has enabled the government to deliver on the promises specifically made in 1987, which delivery of promise has been acknowledged by all those organisations to which I have referred and which have endured the opposition to seek trying to make political capital out of something which cannot carry that task. Now, Mr Speaker, we have not only done that in providing these payments to 1.2 million children, but we have ensured by providing indexation to those payments, Mr Speaker, that the real value of those tax-free payments will be maintained into the future. But that's not all we've done, Mr Speaker. For homeless youth, we have put in place a $100 million package of initiatives providing accommodation for the homeless, income support, labour market assistance, education and healthcare, and improved access to services. In addition, Mr Speaker, coming right up to date, on the 8th of March of this year, I announced the government's commitment to a series of measures to address deficiencies in the provision of services for disadvantaged families and children. Because we know, Mr Speaker, that despite the fact that, as these organisations have said, we have specifically delivered on the financial promise that we made, we know that there are still difficulties. And it's to address those difficulties that on the 8th of March of this year, I announced the government's commitment to a series of measures to address deficiencies in the provision of services for disadvantaged children and their families. For example, Mr Speaker, nearly 280,000 families will benefit from new childcare arrangements. For example, there will be another 50,000 places over the next 5 years and a higher fee relief ceiling. In all, Mr Speaker, by mid-1996, the government will spend $400 million in the biggest expansion of childcare in Australia's history. $400 million. Other measures, Mr Speaker, include the establishment of family resource centres and increased funding for marriage counselling, family mediation, outside school hours care for at-risk adolescents, a package of education programs and an additional $85 million over 3 years for public transport. Now, Mr Speaker, I and my colleagues in government readily acknowledge that the causes of disadvantage are complex, requiring wide-ranging and ongoing responses. We've therefore established, Mr Speaker, a Commonwealth State Territory Ministerial Committee to look at ways for improving the effectiveness of the services provided for disadvantaged children. And during this government's 4th term, the approach that I've outlined will continue to be developed as part of our overall strategy in this area. Mr Speaker, one would have thought that by this stage, those opposite, old and new, would have learnt the lesson which Bishop Hollingworth tried to hammer into their heads, and that is, Mr Speaker...
If the honourable member for Franklin interjects again, I'll deal with him.
And that is, Mr Speaker, they should have learnt the lesson, the old members and the new, that there is a recognition on the part of those working at the face of poverty in this country that this government has done more than has ever been done or contemplated by any government in the history of this country, and that, as the Bishop said and the other organisations said, that what should be done by the opposition is to recognise the dimension of that achievement by this government, and that they should bring to an end this miserable attempt at point scoring from a party which, on its history, on its current policies, would offer nothing but an increase and a massive increase in poverty for children in this country.